Ezra Levant here for Rebel News. I'm just in an Uber going to the airport from HMP Woodhill, where I spent about an hour meeting with Tommy Robinson. This is my report. I'm sorry for the shaky camera and the low light. That's just how it is at this time of day. I've been to HMP Belmarsh to visit Tommy before. That's basically a supermax prison, the Guantanamo Bay of the UK. Woodhill is less of a supermax kind of prison. I think it's called Category B. There's still absolutely atrocious criminals in it, but it is less ominous a place than Belmarsh. It's still a prison, of course. We were led through a labyrinth, a maze of corridors, and to a room of about 15 feet by 30 feet, where Tommy was brought in, and two guards sat in the room the whole time, but at a distance enough that we could talk to Tommy. It was myself, Liam Tufts, and a cousin of Liam, and then Tommy. Right away I could tell that Tommy was in good enough spirits. He's been in prison now for 15 days, so obviously very early yet. How he'll do in 30 days or 40 days is less evident, but he seemed to be mentally and physically fine. I asked him a lot of specific questions about his treatment. He says he's getting the food that he needs and wants. He's allowed to buy more food at the prison canteen. I think he's allowed 60 pounds a month, which he says is sufficient to get what he wants, mainly tuna. He says he's fine in terms of food. He says he's fine in terms of his phone calls. He says that the prison guards listen live to his phone calls, so that somewhat restricts the hours of the day he can make phone calls. But other than that, there's no limit to the number of phone calls he can make. He's allowed visits 4 times a week, which he says is enough for him. He is receiving emails from the emailaprisoner.com system, and he said he talked about some of the emails he receives, and obviously he enjoys getting them. He's in a very small cell because the cell he's staying in is in the segregation unit, really a form of solitary confinement. In the UK, they use the phrase down the block. In America, it would be called down the hole. So he's in a very small cell for 23 and a half hours a day. For the half hour a day where he's let out to have a shower, he's then locked in the shower, which I found a little bit odd. And I find it odd that he's locked in his cell at all, given that he is the only prisoner in the segregation block. He says that all the other prisoners were cleared out in advance of his arrival. So I think there were 16 cells next to each other that normally are full of violent criminals being punished for their misconduct in prison. But Tommy says they've moved them all out, so it's just him in the block, and yet they still put him in his cell 23 and a half hours a day, and also lock him in his shower for half an hour a day, and he has to hammer on the door to get out. He says the number one thing that irritates him is that other prisoners at Woodhill are allowed to exercise 4 times a week, and Tommy himself is only allowed to exercise 2 times a week. And you can imagine that exercise is critically important, not just for his physical condition, but his mental health too, since he's put in solitary confinement. He says the guards have been pleasant enough. He said he spoke to the prison psychiatrist, and he asked the prison psychiatrist, what does it do to a man to be in solitary confinement for 9 months? Tommy has an 18-month sentence, he'll likely serve 9 months. He said obviously the prison psychiatrist said it was a terrible thing. I think the number one thing Tommy Robinson wants at this stage is access to fitness every day. And he pointed out the obvious point, since he's the only person on the block, they could literally put the equipment right outside his cell. There's like no one else there. So he says he feels safe, which is important. But he's being treated like he's done something that the prison ought to punish him for. Normally the people in the segregation wing, people down the block, are, like I said before, people who maybe got into a fight, people who were part of a prison riot, people who did something bad to the guards. So Tommy is being treated with extra punishment that was not contemplated in the judge's sentence. So the judge sentenced Tommy to prison. He didn't sentence Tommy to solitary confinement. That's what the prison is doing, because they don't know how to handle him. But the point is, he's what's called a Category D prisoner. He's a civil prisoner, which is not a criminal prisoner. He has so many more rights than the average prisoner, yet he's not actually having those extra rights, probably because the prison genuinely doesn't know how to handle him. Because if they were to put him in a sort of general population, he would immediately be attacked. Remember, this is the same prison where Tommy was violently attacked, assaulted, and actually fairly seriously hurt last time. But that's not Tommy's fault. That's the fault of His Majesty's prison system, which almost every single prison in the UK is out of control. They're run by the prison gangs. In the United States, you have black gangs and Hispanic gangs and white gangs. In the UK, the dominant gangs are Islamic gangs, and you convert to Islam to get the protection of the gang. I understand that Woodhill is 37% Muslim. Tommy joked with me that in the segregation block, there's a wall of books all about different aspects of Islam. That was the library that he inherited when he moved in there. Tommy, I think, is being fair-minded about it. He says, look, the prison, HMP Woodhill, was given him likely unsuspectingly. That Tommy was sent to Belmarsh, and then Belmarsh sort of got rid of him and sent him to Woodhill, and they're trying to figure out what to do. So he himself seems to be patient with them as they try and figure things out, but he says his patience is running out. Today was his 15th day in custody. So he's hoping that this week provides some alteration. I can tell you from my personal involvement that a prison law firm has been retained and has written a very detailed and footnoted letter to the prison governor addressing the impropriety of keeping Tommy in these current conditions in general, even if he was a criminal prisoner, to be treated this way. You don't put people in solitary confinement for 9 months. You don't do that. That's a form of torture. And that's if he were a criminal prisoner. He is not. He's a civil prisoner. And we'll hope that there's a positive response from the prison. Tommy says that other civil prisoners in his situation are allowed into the community, allowed to go home, allowed to work. And that he would obviously like to do that. And it's not just something he would like to do, it's his right. We also talked about the Terrorism Act case against him, a bogus case where police admitted that he was no terrorist, but were simply using the law as a way to compel him to answer questions. Unlike a regular arrest, when you're arrested under the Terrorism Act, you have no right to remain silent. And that was their way for demanding access to his cell phone, even though his cell phone contains privileged information, both legally and journalistically. Anyways, I'll leave my report there. And I guess if I had to report in general, I would say he's 15 days in. So of course he's not going to be falling apart. Physically and mentally, he's still sharp. He was cracking jokes. He was energetic. He was talking about having another mass rally when he's out. He was giving his thoughts on the legal case of the Terrorism Act. So he's doing fine 15 days in. But he would not be doing fine, because no man can do fine if you're in solitary confinement for an extended period of time. I'll leave my report there because it's grainy. I'm recording it at dusk as I drive away from the prison. I'm glad I came to visit him. This first visit was reassuring in some ways that he's not in acute danger. And I think he's being patient with the prison to give them some time to adjust to him. The prison has received a detailed letter of critique from the prison lawyers we have retained for Tommy. So I guess their move is the next move. We'll see how that goes. I intend to continue visiting Tommy and talking to those who do, to detect if there's any deterioration in his treatment. He is satisfied with certain elements that I think were very important to check: the food, his safety. I think his lack of access to daily gym is a serious problem, and whereas he only gets 2 days a week of exercise, other violent convicted criminal prisoners get 4 days of exercise a week. So he doesn't even have the rights of a regular criminal prison. That's something that needs to be addressed quickly. That's my report. I also took some information from him that I'm going to pass on to the 2 different law firms that are representing him. I promised Tommy that I would pay for those law firms using crowdfunding, and I am relying on your support because obviously those bills are large, but many hands make light work. If you feel motivated to help support Tommy in his Terrorism Act matter, the first hearing of which is actually this upcoming week, or in the larger project to get him in a more suitable prison, please do go to SaveTommy.com. I'd appreciate your help. I know he would too. And I'll put on my Twitter account the best way to email him. I might not be able to get that up today, but I'll do that in the days ahead because he certainly enjoys getting your emails. He does have a TV in his cell with a number of channels, so he's up on the news. We talked a little bit about Donald Trump's win. He was excited by that. So I guess my report is it's not terrible, but that's only because he's been in there just 15 days. If this treatment was still the case in 30 days or 45 days, I would say that it is an untenable situation. I promise to keep you posted. For Rebel News, I'm Ezra Levant. P.S. Help me out at SaveTommy.com, would you?